Hello and a very warm welcome to this edition of A World Panorama, a program that keeps you abreast of all the big international developments that unfolded this week. I'm Aishwarya with you. Let us begin the program with the top headlines. China broadens lockdown to 13 cities to contain deadly coronavirus outbreak. Death toll rises to 41 as virus spreads. Airports around the world are screening travelers from China. WHO says not yet a global health emergency. International Court of Justice orders Myanmar to protect Rohingya minorities, take steps to prevent genocide. Top UN court says the country caused irreparable damage to Rohingyas' rights. Protesters in Lebanon return to the streets after new cabinet formation, call for a complete overhaul of political system. Mexico, under intense pressure from US President Donald Trump, adopts tough measures against Central American migrants intending to reach the US, detains 800 of them, many to be returned to their home countries. And veiled exchanges at World Economic Forum in Davos. Climate activist Greta Thunberg says nothing has been done to tackle climate crisis. Donald Trump tells the world to reject climate change, prophets of doom. China has broadened its lockdown to include at least 13 cities as it strives to contain a deadly virus outbreak the WHO has termed a domestic health emergency. The respiratory virus has claimed 41 lives and infected about 1,300 people in China since it was first detected at a seafood market in Wuhan last month. Cases of the new coronavirus have also been detected around the world from Thailand to South Korea to the US and has now also spread to Europe. WHO says the situation does not yet constitute a global health emergency.
Wuhan starting to look like a city in quarantine. After warning residents not to leave the city and visitors not to come, public transport ban also took effect on Thursday, as China tries to halt the outbreak of a new strain of virus. All flights and passenger train services, buses, subway and ferry services out of Wuhan have been stopped. A special command center has been set up in Wuhan to contain the virus. Tourist attractions and hotels in the city have been told to suspend large-scale activities, while libraries, museums and theatres are cancelling exhibitions and performances. All of this comes just as millions of people are travelling across China for the week-long holiday that is the Lunar New Year.
I'm getting more and more nervous. My family also told me not to go out and not to work. They are very nervous. If one person is ill, the family is doomed. It's so serious. Everyone is really panicking. We are really scared.
Wuhan is believed to be the epicenter of the new coronavirus outbreak. The virus, believed to have emerged late last year from illegally traded wildlife at an animal market in Wuhan. The market has since been shut down. But not just in China, cases have also been detected as far away as the United States, stoking fears that the virus is already spreading worldwide. However, the World Health Organization has announced it will not yet declare a global emergency over the new virus. A global emergency is the highest level of alarm that the WHO can sound and has previously been used in response to swine flu, Zika virus and also Ebola.
In contact with Chinese authorities 24/7, we stress to them that by having a strong action, not only they will control the outbreak in their country, but they will also minimize the chances of this outbreak spreading internationally.
The present new strain of coronavirus not previously identified in humans. The SARS virus that killed nearly 800 people globally in the early 2000s was also a coronavirus. All the fatalities so far have been in Hubei, the province around Wuhan. There have been 3 cases in Thailand, 1 each in Korea, Japan, Taiwan, and the US. American health authorities are monitoring the lone case that has been diagnosed with the virus and people that he was in close contact with, as there is also evidence of human-to-human transmission.
In terms of monitoring the contacts, all the close contacts will be part of what we call active monitoring. That means that a public health worker will call the person daily to do a symptom check for them, see if they have a fever, cough, any respiratory issues.
Countries around the world are also taking precautions, health screening for coronavirus on passengers from Wuhan. Health authorities around the world are working to prevent a global pandemic. The virus infects the lungs and symptoms start with a fever and cough. It can progress to shortness of breath and also breathing difficulties. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
The International Court of Justice has ordered measures to prevent the genocide of Rohingya Muslims in Myanmar. The decision comes despite the de facto leader Aung San Suu Kyi defending her country against the accusations in person last month. Myanmar has responded defiantly to the ruling, saying that it presented a distorted picture of the situation. Thousands of Rohingyas died and more than 7 lakh of them fled to Bangladesh during an army crackdown in 2017. What happened to Rohingya Muslim minority in Myanmar in 2017? Thousands of them died and more than 7 lakh of them were forced to flee to neighboring Bangladesh during a military offensive in 2017. UN investigators called for Myanmar's military to be prosecuted for genocide. Myanmar insists its military campaign was waged to tackle an extremist threat in the Rakhine state. De facto leader Aung San Suu Kyi defended her country against the accusations in person last month. But the United Nations highest court ruled on Thursday that it has the authority to consider a genocide case against Myanmar and ordered the country to prevent irreparable harm from being committed against its Rohingya Muslim minority. The International Court of Justice approved emergency provisional measures compelling Myanmar to halt all the persecution of the ethnic group.
The court considers that with regard to the situation described earlier, Myanmar must, in accordance with its obligations under the Convention and in relation to the members of the Rohingya group in its territory, take all measures within its power to prevent the commission of all acts within the scope of Article 2 of the Genocide Convention.
In the hour-long verdict, it said that Rohingyas continue to remain extremely vulnerable. The ruling does not establish whether Myanmar committed genocide, but is the first step in a broader legal case likely to run for years.
The ICJ made a decision on most of issues Gambia raised. On the other side, the ICJ fairly dropped the most feared issue for Myanmar's government, that Myanmar had to approve the UN Fact-Finding Commission. I think the ICJ conclusion is satisfying for both countries.
Myanmar's government must report back to the court within 4 months. Regular updates are also required every 6 months until the court comes to a final verdict. Rohingya Muslims living as refugees in Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh, expressed gratitude after the verdict.
We as witnesses with Gambia went to ICJ court. As we have won the case, I am very happy and grateful to Gambia and pray to Allah for them. I have seen the ruling on the television. It is a win for all the Rohingya people.
Meanwhile, Myanmar's military has said that the country would overcome any challenges posed by the ICJ's ruling by showing unity.
Myanmar's government cooperated with us well together for our defense in court. We believe we can overcome the challenge if we are united and work together.
The lawsuit was filed by Gambia in November last year, which sought to prove an ongoing genocide is being carried out. While the ICJ's decisions are legally binding, the court has no means of enforcing them. An estimated 6 lakh Rohingyas in Myanmar are said to have endured decades of systematic discrimination that Amnesty International says amounts to apartheid. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
This week, Lebanon, that has been witnessing months of public protest over a complete overhaul of the political system, saw a new cabinet being formed on Tuesday. Prime Minister Hassan Diab said that it would be a rescue team that would work to meet the protesters' demands. However, hours later, the protesters returned to the streets, saying that the new ministers were selected by the entrenched political elite that they blame for Lebanon's problems.
Fireworks lighting up Beirut's sky. But it is far from festive. These are Lebanese protesters who set on fire a tent for security forces, who then responded with tear gas and water cannons. The protesters are unhappy with the country's new cabinet. The issue also echoed in the ongoing World Economic Forum in Davos, where former Lebanese Foreign Minister Gebran Bassil called ongoing protests as positive and appealed to the world leaders to help save his country from becoming a failed state.
Many politicians don't want the reform, don't want to fight corruption. They are part of it. And this is an ongoing fight. What is happening now in the streets is very positive because it's creating dynamics to create that change and to make this change happen.
Lebanon formed a new cabinet on Tuesday following 3 months of political deadlock after former Prime Minister Saad Hariri resigned amid unprecedented nationwide protests against the country's rapidly deteriorating economy as well as rampant corruption. The new government, which consists of 20 ministers, is led by the newly appointed Prime Minister Hassan Diab. Describing it as a rescue government, Diab said the new cabinet does not represent a political party or group. He further said that his government will tackle economic issues but asked people to give him some time.
I salute the uprising that pushed for this path to be realized. Lebanon has won. It is a government that meets the aspirations of protesters across the country after more than 3 months of anger and will work towards addressing their demands.
But hours after the new cabinet was announced, violent demonstrations were witnessed on the streets of central Beirut again, with protesters expressing anger at the new government, which they say is part of the same political elite they have been rallying against.
This establishment and these leaders do not represent us. This government doesn't reflect us. We want a government made of our own. We want the money that was stolen. We want healthcare. We want power supply. We want early parliamentary elections.
The deal for a new cabinet came after an agreement by the Iranian-backed Hezbollah, a major parliamentary bloc, and its allies. But people are expressing their dissent, calling the new cabinet a one-color government aligned to Hezbollah, saying it mostly consists of ministers linked to the political elite. Over the past few months, the Lebanese lira also lost about a third of its value against the US dollar, deepening the country's economic crisis. A shortage of foreign exchange led banks to enforce capital controls, which has prevented people to withdraw their earnings and savings. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
In World Panorama, we'll take a very short break, and after the break, we will tell you how wild exchanges were seen between climate activist Greta Thunberg and US President Donald Trump at the World Economic Forum this year. All the details coming up ahead. Stay tuned. Welcome back after the break. Mexican authorities are adopting tougher measures against Central American migrants who had entered Mexico illegally, intending to reach the border with the United States. Close to 800 migrants have been transferred to immigration centers, and if their legal status cannot be resolved, they will be returned to their home countries. Mexico is under intense pressure from US President Donald Trump to contain the mass movements of migrants who have been crossing through Mexico on their way to the US border.
Hundreds of Central American migrants wading across the river on Mexico's southern border, trying to reach the United States of America. The migrants were stopped by Mexican authorities and refused permission to cross a nearby bridge. As a result, they took to the water. The security forces then fired tear gas to force the migrants back and rounded up those who managed to make it across.
It was a very hard experience for all those people who want to go across the border. It is very difficult to cross now. Wherever you go, they surround you, grab people, and return them to Honduras.
National Guard troops with riot shields are trying to stop the migrants from climbing the banks of the Suchiate River, which marks the border between Mexico and Guatemala. Some of those who were stopped threw stones at the police. The detained migrants have been transferred to immigration stations. Most of the migrants were sent back to their homeland. Fewer than 100 remain in the no man's land along the river between Guatemala and Mexico. Many of the migrants say they were fleeing violence, poverty, and high murder rates in their respective Central American countries. However, Mexico has cut off migration routes to the US under pressure from President Donald Trump.
We
want Mexican migration authorities can open up so that Honduran people can fulfill their dream. Because in our country, it's very difficult to get by, and this is the only thing we can do in order to survive and the only thing left. I know it's risky, but it's more risky to remain in Honduras. We hope they open up and have some mercy.
Que tome un poco de conciencia.
The caravan of thousands of people had set out from Honduras last week in hopes Mexico would grant them passage. Mexico says migrants being held in immigration centers are being allowed to seek refuge in Mexico itself or being given temporary work permits that would confine them to southern Mexico. But thousands of others are being deported back by plane or by bus. Mexican authorities say migrants need to respect Mexican laws.
Sábado y domingo, 2,400 migrantes.
Those who have taken up programs offered by Mexico have taken them up. Those who have wanted to return to their country are being returned with Mexico's support. Yesterday, a group of about 1,000 tried to enter the country by force. A tragedy was averted. There is always the chance of tragedy because there can be problems if there are men and women.
President Trump reached a deal with Mexico in June to stem the flow of migrants to the US after threatening it with high tariffs. Mexico agreed to take unprecedented steps to curb irregular migration, including deploying the National Guard. Trump has made the fight against illegal migration to the US a major policy issue and has taken measures to deter entry across the border from Mexico, including plans for a border wall. The Pentagon this week received a new request from the Trump administration to build roughly 435 kilometers of wall on the border with Mexico and is evaluating its cost and viability. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And here is a look at some more international news stories in Global Buzz. After years of acrimonious debate, British lawmakers on Wednesday finally approved the terms of their country's historic departure from the European Union. MPs in the lower house of Commons had already backed the EU withdrawal agreement, which ratifies the divorce deal that UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson struck with Brussels last year. But the unelected upper house of Lords made some changes this week. But the Commons rejected all the 5 amendments and sent the bill back to the Lords, who then reluctantly agreed to back down. The European Parliament still has to back the deal in a vote next week. The US Senate has rejected repeated Democratic attempts to secure new evidence in US President Donald Trump's impeachment as his trial began. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, meanwhile, backed off on a plan to fast-track the hearings after coming under intense pressure from fellow Republicans. Democrats said that this would have been no less than a cover-up. Trump is charged with abuse of power and obstruction of the congressional inquiry. He denies wrongdoing. Senators have taken oaths to act as impartial jurors, hearing arguments for 6 hours a day, 6 days a week, in a trial presided over by the US Chief Justice John Roberts. And a former Interpol chief accused of bribery was sentenced to 13.5 years in jail by a Chinese court on Tuesday. Meng Hongwei, who was the first Chinese head of Interpol, vanished on a trip back to the country from France in September 2018. China later confirmed that he had been detained as part of President Xi Jinping's drive against corruption. Meng has admitted to taking more than $2 million in bribes. The 56-year-old was also ordered by the court to pay a fine of 2 million yuan. The court statement said that Meng would not appeal against the verdict. At the annual gathering of the world's political, business and financial elite in Davos, the focus this year at the World Economic Forum was climate change. The summit saw veiled exchanges between climate activist Greta Thunberg and US President Donald Trump. Thunberg, in her address, emphasized that nothing has been done to tackle the climate crisis, while President Donald Trump suggested that the world reject climate change prophets of doom and their predictions of the apocalypse. The team then scoffed at Donald Trump's announcement of US planting more trees, saying that that was not enough and our house is still on fire.
Considered the world's most exclusive talk shop of the rich, famous and powerful. The annual meeting of the World Economic Forum, or Davos as it's more commonly known, kicked off on Tuesday in Switzerland. Sustainability and climate change are top issues at this year's Davos meeting. Climate activist Greta Thunberg took the stage to admonish world leaders for doing basically nothing to reduce carbon emissions, despite evidence of a looming climate catastrophe.
And people, it seems like the climate and environment is a hot topic right now, and a lot thanks to young people pushing. But of course, if you see it from another perspective, pretty much nothing has been done since the global emissions of CO2 has not reduced. And that is, of course, what we are trying to achieve, among other things.
Speaking just hours before US President Donald Trump's appearance, Thunberg reminded world leaders of the statistics outlined in the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report released in October 2018. The report had pointed that a global temperature rise of 1.5 degrees Celsius was a threshold at which the planet would see the worst effects of climate change. The report warned that if the current rate of greenhouse gas emissions continues, the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold could be passed as early as 2030.
Since last summer, I've been repeating these numbers over and over again in almost every speech. But honestly, I don't think I have once seen any media outlets or person in power communicated this and what it means. I know you don't want to report about this. I know you don't want to talk about this. But I assure you I will continue to repeat these numbers until you do.
Meanwhile, in his speech, US President Donald Trump took a swipe at environmental policy makers and activists. He said that one should reject climate change prophets of doom and predictions of apocalypse. He also announced the US be joining an initiative to restoring 1 trillion trees by 2050. At a conference in which the main theme is the environment, Trump spoke about the economic importance of oil and gas.
Well, I'm a big believer in the environment. The environment to me is very important. Well, we're doing the 1 trillion trees together with lots of other people and lots of other countries, and I'm a very big believer in the environment.
Speaking again shortly after Trump, Thunberg said, "Planting trees is good, but nowhere near enough, saying our house is still on fire. Your inaction is fueling the flames by the hour." Late last year, the Trump administration began pulling the US out of the landmark Paris Climate Agreement of 2015, which has nearly 200 nations as signatories. Under the deal, each country sets voluntary goals to curb emissions of heat-trapping gases that scientists say lead to climate change. Trump has called the Paris Accord an unfair economic burden to the US economy. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And before we go, take a look at India's Rapunzel. A 17-year-old girl in India's Western Aravalli district has broken her own Guinness World Record for the longest hair on a teenager. With 190 centimeter long tresses, Nilanshi Patel topped her earlier record of 170.5 centimeters from 2018. A science student, Nilanshi developed the love for long hair at the tender age of 6 following a bad haircut experience. And now it takes up to half an hour for her hair to dry and as long as an hour to comb. So here are the visuals as I take your leave. I'll see you next week in another edition of World Panorama. See you then. Bye-bye.